Welcome, everyone. Welcome back. I am simply delighted to be interviewing my two guests today. Bridgett is a former elementary school teacher, mom of a son and daughter, and she is married to her college sweetheart. She and neighborhood friend Colleen Rosenblum started Hot Flashes and Cool Topics podcast because they were in search of a voice for midlife women. Colleen is a former attorney turned Pilates instructor, mom to two beautiful daughters, and she's married to her high school sweetheart. Hot Flashes and Cool Topics wants to change the narrative for women in midlife and beyond to reflect modern women. This demographic of women are powerful consumers with loads of life experiences. Hot Flashes and Cool Topics recognizes the multifaceted woman in this age group and eagerly share both the hot flash side of health and wellness, along with the cool topic side of lifestyle, travel, and fashion. Colleen, Bridgett, welcome.
Thank you.
I love the topic. I love the title you have, Hot Flashes, Cool Topics. Did you hit on that right away, or did it take a little bit of trial and error before you got just the right title for your podcast?
We kind of hit on it right away. We had, Bridget and I have been friends for several years. We moved into a neighborhood about 5 or 6 years ago when we started to become empty nesters. And a friend of ours had a podcast and we were like, you know what? Let's look around and see what kind of podcasts are out there for the midlife woman. And there are some great ones, but they're very niche specific. So it's either about menopause or about empty nesting or about careers. And that's wonderful. But we kind of wanted to be that podcast that covered everything. Mm-hmm. So we started talking about obviously hot flashes, because that's a common denominator for women in our demographic. And it just kind of the play on words, hot flashes and cool topics, because we wanted to cover everything. Yeah. So that it happened quite quickly, Bridget. Right?
Within the first week, we were thinking of a few little things, and Colleen, it just like kind of happened. And I was like, I love it. Let's go with that. Yeah.
That's so awesome. And so now, Bridgett, you were a former elementary school teacher, Colleen, former attorney. So did you retire and then you were sort of looking for something to do, or did you decide to pivot into this as a way of finding, I don't know, maybe more fulfilling work, or was there some other reason?
I had retired, probably it's 10 years now since I left. So I actually kind of quit early. Like, I wouldn't say I retired. My mother was having health problems. So that was the sandwich generation right in there, getting ready for empty nest. My son was already in college. My daughter was getting ready to graduate from high school. I really wanted time with special people. I really wanted time with my daughter, time with my mother, and I just went ahead and quit my career. I still miss the children. I don't miss all the paperwork involved with teaching. So Colleen and I both kind of went through some pivots in our careers. My husband we moved to where we live now, new job, new town, new city, new things to try out. And it probably was about 3 or 4 years after, well, maybe more, 5 years after we moved here, that Colleen and I started the podcast.
And for myself, the law, it's hard to say I kind of fell into it, but my husband's a lawyer and his sister's a lawyer and his brother's a lawyer. And I think it just was like a path that we all went towards, but I knew pretty quickly that it was not the path I was meant for. I just didn't find it fulfilling. And I'm not the type of person who likes to argue over everything. So I'd be like, can't we just all get along? And in the litigious nature of the legal practice, that really didn't fall too well. So I practiced until I had my children. And then I stayed home for a little bit. And once they got into school, I realized, okay, it's time for me. And I didn't know, and I think this happens for a lot of women. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew what I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And that is a strength for us, because the older we get, the more we know what we don't want, so that opens the door for new adventures. And I thought, okay, well, I'm a couch potato. Let me start exercising and see if I start to, my mind opens up. And I fell in love with Pilates, and I I always like to learn more about what I'm doing. So I kept learning and learning, and they said, why don't you go to school for it? And I say that I think Pilates school was harder than law school, because doing all those hours when you have children and a husband and you're traveling, it's just a very different time of life. And I practiced for about 12 years. And then Bridget and I both were at a stage. It kind of really hit at the right time where we wanted to do something different, but we wanted to do something meaningful. And that's how the podcast was formed.
Well, you touched on having a feeling, I guess, or a sense. Some people describe it as a calling, something that pulls you in a particular direction or pulls you away from something. So, and a lot of women that I talk to, they feel the same thing. They sense that this is not, whatever career or job or part of their life that's not really serving them anymore. They know there's a change that they need to make, but they're not sure quite what. Can you describe a little bit? I just kind of want to get at the essence of that calling. Was it a voice? Was it a feeling? How would you describe it? Because I think a lot of women have it and maybe just don't realize.
I think what happened for me, I know that there was a lot of frustration growing around really what Colleen and I found that we wanted to talk about with other women. There was so much frustration out there about what was going on in this time of life. I had never heard of the word perimenopause until I was already in it. I knew what menopause was, didn't know what this peri stuff was. I didn't know what was happening to me. And I really had to dig for some answers as to what's going on. And I think Colleen and I both, I think it was at lunch one day when we were really talking about our frustration and just trying to figure out what's going on and really wanting to call the bull, factor on things that were being told to us.
You can say bullshit if you want.
I can say that. I know we don't say it on our podcast.
Go ahead.
But the bullshit factor, yes. I was like, that's bullshit. And, I think Colleen and I both were like, yeah, we've got to find out what is going on for women in our demographic and what can we do to find it and to get the word out to other women.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me how it started. Was it kind of a slow build to get your audience for the podcast, or did it just touch a nerve in a whole lot of women and it was more like an avalanche?
I think it slowly built into an avalanche, if that's a way to describe it. Bridget and I both were very excited, but lacked a lot of the technical savvy that was needed to create a podcast. So we always say, like, the first 5 or 6 episodes, you can just skip those and go right into the rest. We were very excited to learn about it. We thank YouTube for explaining a lot of the things we needed to learn. And I think it's important for women of our demographic to understand that it's never too late to learn. And it's never too late to grow. And don't be afraid because you don't know something. Bridget and I had no idea how to do a podcast, none at all. And we did have a friend who had one. So she was a great source of information, but you could still do it. And it's really important for women to remember, you take every experience that you have in any career that you've done so far into this next one. Mm-hmm. So for example, when I pivoted from the law to Pilates, people thought I was insane. They were like, what about the money? What about the all the education you put in? But I knew that I wasn't leaving that behind. I was just rolling it into a different way to do something I enjoyed. Mm-hmm. And I don't think any time or experience is wasted. And I think as we grow, as we get older, we learn that. So starting a podcast was, yes, overwhelming, but we knew that we just knew that there was a demographic of women who needed that voice. And we started right before the menopause movement gained momentum, like literally, I think a few months before. And I think having that menopause conversation open up and a lot of celebrities talking about it, a lot of brands coming out, we kind of got swept into that tornado of conversation, and it's just taken off. And we kind of say, okay, what would we want to talk about? What would we like to know? And that's how we find our topics of conversation. And we get great emails from listeners who are like, could you talk about this? We need to talk about that. So there's always something to talk about.
Yeah, and I do want to ask you about the topics in just a moment, but first there's a few things that you've mentioned that I want to touch on. The first is that you collaborated, so that you had each other to lean on. And so for any people in our audience, any of the women watching this, I guess we could encourage them, if you feel a little daunted, you're thinking about something like this, you feel a little daunted, collaborate with someone, find a friend who's interested in doing it too, and that'll make it easier. But the other thing that I wanted to highlight in what you said, Colleen, was we're learning something new, and that's so invigorating and enlivening, isn't it? I mean, I think a lot of women, certainly the clients that I talk with, often speak about just not knowing. This is a time of transition, and they just don't know where they're going, and they don't feel a sense of being lit up by anything anymore. Kids are launched or launching, career is winding down, perhaps sometimes relationships are reaching their natural conclusion. So it can be a very disorienting time. And I think the danger is in getting really complacent and just keep doing the same thing. So you're such an inspiration, the two of you, for having the courage to try this. And you probably felt, although there have been challenges with technology, I'm sure, you still feel really excited about each day and what you're doing and the community that you're building. Is that a fair assessment of it?
Absolutely. It is a very fair assessment of it. It's just the amount of what I have learned, health-wise, entertainment-wise, hobby-wise, family, fashion, everything that I have learned from the people that we've talked to. It's amazing. I never knew that I would learn so much at this age. And like Colleen said earlier, you are never too old to learn new things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about the topics that you've covered and some of the things? I mean, I'm sure there've been some surprises here and there, but what kinds of topics, what does your audience really want from you? What are the things that they respond to most?
Anytime that you have the topic of menopause, it's going to draw attention because doctors simply don't have the information, many of them, that women need. They want answers to their questions. And a lot of doctors have not been adequately educated on everything for menopause. They haven't had enough credit hours when they were in med school or CEC, continuing education credits, to really understand all the nuances. So whenever we have an expert that may be NAM certified, which is North American Menopause Society, or someone who has been, certified in whatever specific area of menopause that we may talk about, that just draws attention immediately. Anytime you mention weight loss for women, it's sad, but it is a topic that women love to talk about. But when we talk about it, we try not to talk about the diet generation. We talk more about a lifestyle, because at this age, and Bridgett and I both say this all, I don't want to be told what I can't eat. I don't want to be told that I have to boot camp. I'm not exercising to lose weight and fit in a dress. I'm exercising to either be healthy or lose weight to be healthier. So it's a different conversation for women 45, 50 and up. So we try to make it we try to listen to the audience. The audience wants to know, they love when we do catching up with celebrities. We've had some great celebrities on the show, and they just like the conversation. I think, and Bridgett, you can talk more on this, but I think for our listeners, they want community, they want connection, they want to be entertained, and they want to be educated. Yes. What about you, Bridgett?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just, you covered so many great topics that we have talked about. And one that is so taboo around women in our demographic, because we were probably taught to be good little girls and not talk about sexual health. And that is something that we have learned from some fascinating, great doctors, great people who are developing products out there for women, and things that, you probably thought there was maybe something wrong with you because it was painful to have sex anymore. And then we're finding out that vaginal dryness is a real problem with women at our age, and products are out there that are available to help you with those situations. You probably don't have the desire that you had, and there's things out there to help you with that. So that's been fascinating. And I really learned that the vaginal dryness thing works also for urinary tract infections, that kind of the products out there for vaginal dryness can really help because the skin gets so thin. I mean, I had no idea what the connection was there. So it's amazing what we've learned, just things that maybe in the past were taboo,
Mhm.
that, hey, this is a safe space. You can talk about this and we are not going to judge you. And other women want to know as well. So just ask away. And if we don't know, we're going to find someone that does know about it.
Yeah, that is absolutely wonderful. And I think you're right that a lot of women feel reluctant to talk about these things openly, or shy to talk about them openly, because we've had the messaging for so much of our lives. Good girls don't speak out, good girls don't make waves, good girls don't cause a fuss. We're to be, just following the program. And so it is quite remarkable that so many women aren't informed about these kinds of issues. And that includes, Colleen, you touched on this, it includes doctors, people in the medical profession. I know my doctor, with some of the issues I had with menopause, eventually, because she wasn't able to help me, she told me that it's in my head. It must be in my head. That was her response ultimately, which is not a very caring perspective in healthcare. So do you find women are responding to your topics by saying like, oh, thank you, at last, I finally have a voice in this?
Absolutely. A lot of women in our demographic feel invisible and they don't feel seen and heard. And I think anyone at any age just wants to feel seen and heard. So when you're going to a doctor, or you're going to your spouse, or you're talking to your girlfriends, and they close up on a particular topic, you don't feel like you have anywhere to go. And one of the things that we have really noticed is we have a private Facebook group with about 4,500 women in it. And the questions they ask, because they know it's a safe space, they could be 3 a.m. and someone's going to say, I am up again tonight and I can't sleep. Anyone else up? Anyone want to help? Just feeling that community, people need to feel there's a community that understands and relates. And until the taboo topics are no longer taboo, women don't feel comfortable sharing them in a group. Even Bridget and I are just amazed with peers when they don't want to talk about it. Bridget and I, we'll embarrass ourselves. We'll bring it up. We have no problem with it. But a lot of women are like, oh no, that means I'm getting older and people aren't going to pay attention, or I don't want to talk about menopause. It's just the taboo like Bridget said, needs to be removed from these topics, because like anything else, it's a stage of life that if you are lucky enough, you are going to go through as a female.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think anybody gets through this phase unscathed. Very few people do. We all are hitting the symptoms, and so I guess it's important to highlight that no woman is alone. There's a huge part of the population that are dealing with the same things, and so you can always reach out to someone. What are some of the, I suppose, freedoms that your listeners experience? So one might be, I'm sure you have some listeners that say, as we said, at last, finally I can talk about this. But what are some of the other ways that people are feeling more free because of the work you're doing on your podcast?
I think it's just the freedom. Most of the women, not all women, because several women have children late in life, but your children, either you've never had children or the children are grown. A lot of times you have more money to spend, more of a discretionary income to spend, and travel more, and maybe do things that you had never done, something that you always wanted to do. Take a dance class or travel to a certain place that you want it to be, or really that you have the time to really go down a rabbit hole on a topic that you really wanted to know, and before you just didn't have time to do that. Those are some of the freedoms. I had to laugh. I shared on TikTok a few weeks ago, I was in Florida and I was just sitting up at a bar at a beach place, and this kid starts screaming, but it didn't bother me at all because it wasn't my kid. And I just had my drink and was like, not my kid. I'm not worried at all about that. Those kinds of freedoms that are out there, and the freedom that you really, things just don't bother you like they might have bothered you when you were in your 20s. You're just not really that concerned about what other people think. It's at that point, I think the saying is, I can't, I have nothing to do with your opinion of me. That's all you. So that's one of the freedoms. Anything else, Colleen, that you can think
Oh,
of?
I think that's one of the biggest freedoms, of not caring what other people think. That's a privilege we have earned. We've earned the freedom to try new things without fear of failure, because we've learned that failure isn't really what you consider, it's just a life experience. You'll survive it because you've already survived other things. So perspective allows for great freedom in midlife. You have the freedom of just finding joy. It doesn't have to be defined by the biggest things in the world. It can be something very small. And you also, peace. I don't think people realize that just having peace in your life is a great freedom to have, because you're in your 20s, you're in your 30s, you're going, everyone else is a priority. But now all of a sudden you can put yourself first, and that garners a lot of guilt for women in our demographic, because we have been taught that every other person in the world comes first before you. But now self-care is a priority, and especially mental health self-care. And it's a foreign concept for a lot of our listeners. So telling them, no, it's okay to say no. And it's a full sentence. No is a full sentence. You could say no, thank you if you prefer, but explanations aren't needed. You can just make a decision because you want to, not because it's in the best interest of everyone else.
Is that a hard sell for your audience, that they can take on these freedoms, that they can let go of that? What kind of response do you get when you have topics like that in your podcast?
A big response that it's like they never realized it before. We were having a conversation with an expert about hormones one day, and she was explaining that as you get older, when your hormones become imbalanced, you actually feel less of a need to nurture that mama bear. Because some women are like, why don't I feel the need to do all those things I was doing before? It's hormonal. It's okay. And explaining it that way, not only did Bridgett and I go, well, that explains it, but so did all of our listeners that day. We're like, oh, you mean it's not me? It's actually a natural process in life. So when you explain it that way, I don't think there's as much guilt involved in that. And it's just women don't realize that it's okay to put yourself first. So when someone uses an example, or we might have an expert on that explains how, the voices, what you hear in your head, you don't have to consider those the primary voices. Oh, you have to do this. All those definitive statements of, if you're a good person, you'll do that. It's okay that they're not that main focus, that you don't have to follow every directive in your brain, which is not always an easy thing to do.
Right. The estrogen, I remember she would say estrogen was like the glue. And then as you start to lose that estrogen, you start to lose those little instincts that you had to be like the hovering helicopter mom or whatever it was. And that really helped explain a lot, because you get so upset with yourself that I should feel more concerned about this situation with my child or whomever, your loved one, your niece or nephew, and you're like, I'm just not feeling it anymore. And I was like, okay, it's my estrogen loss. There we go. I'm okay. I'm perfectly fine.
Yeah. So do women, when they're hearing that message, because what's happening, there's so many things happening at this time. So we're the sandwich generation, where we've got kids that we've been caring for, and they need less of our attention. We have parents that are aging that may need more of our attention. And so I guess, do women have a hard time giving themselves permission to put themselves first? And is it, I don't know, do you have advice for them, for someone that's really struggling with that, to get over the guilt and the feeling like they're somehow not doing what they're supposed to be doing? Right. If that's the case.
Well, it's counterintuitive, isn't it? Because we've spent the last 20 years of our lives making sure everyone else is perfectly happy, which of course there is no perfection, and prioritizing everyone else's needs above our own. So to do a 180 on that and all of a sudden say, you guys, I'm out of here, I'm doing a self-care day, that can be quite difficult. So it's taking those baby steps. It's saying, okay, like for example, Bridgett likes to laugh at me, but I have a 10 o'clock curfew. I go to bed at 10 o'clock every night. And my children, who are now adults, know, my husband knows, my friends know, don't invite me anywhere if it's past 10 o'clock. Because for me, that I need sleep. Sleep is very important as I've gotten older. So that's a small thing that I can do for myself that isn't going to hurt anybody else. I'm not not prioritizing other people's needs, but I'm putting myself up with them. So maybe it's not, okay, push everybody else down and put yourself up. But it's kind of leveling the playing field and saying, I'm up there with you.
Yeah.
I agree. I know that I felt like that at times, that, oh, they're going to be upset if I'm not doing this because I always do this as their mother or the spouse. And I know from my mother, it's okay. That's an unusual situation. I'm one of 12 children. Same mom and dad. I'm number 11. But for my mother, that was such a big thing. She would just make every meal and just was the queen mother. And after my father passed away and she moved out of that house where she made every big meal, she never cooked again. She never cooked again. And it was actually, we all just accepted it. It was almost like, okay, she's not going to cook anymore. She might open a can of soup or do whatever. And I'm not doing that anymore. But I know a lot of women that we have talked to, or maybe have been on our Facebook group or emailed. It's hard when they might have a spouse or children that are very, adamant about what they are used to, and, really don't want to let go of what their mother was doing for them or their significant other was doing for them. And that's really hard. We've had different talks, and we've seen some tears come out, and that's really difficult. And that's really where the mental health part comes into play as well. That's another taboo that needs to be taken away. There is nothing wrong with therapy. There is nothing wrong with admitting that I need some help. I need to talk to someone. I might even need to go somewhere for a while and take care of my mental health. And, it's been really fascinating. We've talked to celebrities who have done that. We have talked to doctors that really give great advice at that. So that's another thing to where we need to really tell women, well, really, we don't need to give permission. You've had permission all along, but that it is okay to take this time for you. And some people, it is difficult. Money is tough. Sometimes not everybody has the insurance to pay for their mental health care, or they may not have, I don't know, but there is a lot available now. There's a lot of telehealth available, and we try to find avenues and guests that can help people in that situation.
It sounds as though, this can be a time where there's a real loss of identity, a real shift in that regard. And not only for the woman herself having a sense of, who am I now? My role is changing so dramatically. Who am I now? But also from the people around her, noticing some changes. So does this come up often in your conversations, this idea about identity and who am I? And what kinds of feedback do you get from your listeners about that?
It definitely comes up a lot. And what's interesting is that it doesn't matter if we're talking to an expert, an author, a celebrity, the woman on the street, they all mention that there's definitely a shift in who am I at this stage of life. It seems to be a common denominator. And it's hard because the transition's quite quick. Like you're either a mom or you're a corporate executive or you're both, and you have a spouse that maybe you haven't spent as much time with while the kids were growing up, and now you're home alone with them and you don't necessarily recognize them, or you're going through menopause, so your hormones are completely out of whack. There are a number of factors that play into this, but this is a very big topic that is brought up across the board, and it's okay. I think women, it's a very uncomfortable feeling. Mm-hmm. And like Bridgett said, mental health is something that a lot of women don't want to talk about, but it's important to talk about because it's okay to kind of feel on unstable ground right now. And small steps to just, maybe, we've talked to experts about how to communicate with your spouse at a time where you feel like they don't understand you, and changing the conversation and the way you speak to each other. We've had experts on about that. We've had experts about career shifting and why women feel that strong need to maybe change careers, or even if they want to stay in their career, they don't feel like they're seen or heard anymore. We've had experts talk about that. So we always say to our listeners and to our groups, we don't have the answer, but if you email us with a question, we will find the expert who does. So you don't feel alone, because that isolation can be very damaging to your physical and your mental health.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. Just even in our group, when the other women come in to help, a woman might pose a question or what's going on with her, just the other women that come in and just say, I'm going through this. I feel this. That is the first step. When you don't feel alone. I know that I used to feel if a certain thing happened that this is not happening to anybody else in the world. It's just me and I'm the weirdo and I'm just not normal. But then you hear these other women that talk about things that are going on with them and you're thinking, this happens to other people. That is the first step where you do not feel alone. And it is amazing what a lot of women are going out there and doing to make sure they're helping other people. When Colleen said in the workplace, there's a group of women that are addressing menopause in the workplace. Just having this recognized, having a day where you can take care, where you can take a day off, and it's not really like a sick day or even a mental health day. It's, I have got an issue that I'm going through right now, whether it's physical or, something, or hormonal change. I mean, there's women, I think it's really in Great Britain where they're really taking the real push forward with this. They've gone to Parliament to have it recognized. And it is amazing what they're addressing. And I would have never thought to ever bring up menopause in the workplace until these women said this needs to be recognized. So it's just sharing that information and not feeling alone.
A couple of the other interviews I've done with women, they had to leave their careers because of menopause. They could not handle the physical symptoms they were experiencing, not just the hot flashes, but the insomnia, the brain fog, indecision. Sometimes there's rage that surfaces at this time, and there are lots of reasons why that happens. But it's dramatic. It's significant. There's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong. It's just that this is the change that's going on. And so knowing that you're not alone, Bridgett, that's so important to stress. Can you talk a little bit about what are some of the questions that you get from your listeners?
Well, we just hit on one, that they're not alone. Like, am I the only person who wakes up in the middle of the night with night sweats and I'm drenched? Am I the only person who feels like no one hears me when I walk into one of my conferences with the other employees? Why is this happening to me? We get that a lot. Now that can apply to a number of different topics, but why is it that I don't feel like myself anymore? Like, is that normal? And, women just, they're not educated, and it's not because it's not our fault. It's that the society and the media don't want to talk to us about menopause and our changing bodies. And menopause is just one topic in numbers that apply to midlife women, but can affect all aspects of our life. It can affect our home, it can affect work, it can affect our mental health, our physical well-being. So it does, and it can last up to 10 years. So it does play a huge role that goes unnoticed most of the time. So if shining a light on that, women, we get a lot of questions on that. What's happening? Why am I having these night sweats? What can I take? Are HRTs dangerous? I've heard some reports about HRTs. So we'll have experts on to kind of, change the narrative, to expose the misinformation, and educate, because that's what we want to make sure women are getting. We don't want to just have anybody come on the show. We want to make sure these doctors are experts in their fields, so that you're getting the correct information that you deserve and that you should be able to readily get. And unfortunately, a lot of women are just not able to get that information. And when it comes to relationships, we want to make sure that they know they're not going crazy. And they were like, why do I want to kill my husband? Why do I want to strangle my partner? I never felt that way before. Or why do I not know what to say to him or her? I don't even know what to say. So we get a lot of that. We get, what do I do now?
Mm-hmm.
What do I do? The kids have left. And, we've gotten experts, and even from our own personal experience, when they say, what do I do now that I'm not a mom? Well, you're always going to be a mom. You're just a mom in a different way. And if you focus all of your attention on the past and what you've lost, then you can't see what's right in front of you, or something to look for. So we always say, when children are dropped off at college, have something to look forward to for yourself. It can be simple. It could be a long weekend with your husband, or it could be a date night or a group of girlfriends getting together, but have something to look forward to. So when you go home, You're not looking at that door that's now closed and just living in the past. It's so much of creating that narrative for the future. So we get questions on what to do. Who am I now? I mean, what did I miss, Bridgett? I'm sure I missed something.
Oh, there's, that is a big one too, about the empty nest. And also so many women talk about, oh my gosh, and this happened to me personally, where's this weight coming from? And whatever used to work for me is not working now. And we've really learned a lot about as you age and what is important. And, these fasting diets and are just things that I don't know. Trendy things maybe aren't the best thing, about how important protein is in your diet, fiber is in your diet, how sugar is really scary because it causes inflammation, and inflammation causes disease. We've learned about what's best for longevity, not just longevity in years, but longevity in years and health, to be healthy and, sharp minded. And also, you were talking about just consumers. We're powerful consumers and we aren't recognized. I mean, Colleen always says they don't know what to do with us at this demographic. And it is very frustrating that when you're trying to find something targeted toward you, or when you flip through a fashion magazine and you see all the luxury designer brands on 20-year-olds and they're using our credit cards to buy those products. And it's very frustrating. You're just like, come on, have someone our age on there.
Yeah.
So that can be frustrating. And I am really very pleased to see that a lot of advertisers or catalogs are using real women, not that these people aren't fake, but they're using your typical average woman. I'm glad to see that in advertisement. We've talked to women that actually created an agency targeting midlife women. And, so that's another thing that's very frustrating. And we still got work to do in that area, but that's something we would like to see more products, more just advertising in general, targeting the midlife woman. And it doesn't have to be, Colleen always says, we're not diapers, we're not shopping Depends yet. We're somewhere in between. And that's another topic. Oh, when I said Depends though, urinary incontinence, we had a great conversation with someone about that as well, because that is a question we get a lot from women, is about what to do about leakage and things like that. It was a fascinating conversation and I learned a lot there. So there's so many topics I don't even know. I wrote down a list and so many things that we've learned on this podcast.
Well, the two of you are providing such an important and valuable service to women everywhere. I'm so impressed and have so much respect for what you're doing. Thank you, because obviously there's an enormous need for this. And I'd like to encourage all our listeners to check out Hot Flashes and Cool Topics, because you're obviously hitting on all of the pain points for women. I imagine you are just going to continue to grow and grow and grow, as you should. Congratulations on this work that you're doing. It's beautiful work. And as I said, it's important and so needed right now. I guess all that's left is just to invite you to share your gift for our audience today.
Well, we get to interview so many different women that we like to share some of their expert advice. So we have a PDF that says 15 expert tips for living healthy, strong, and happy in midlife and beyond. And we've picked some of the top 15 of our guests that share their advice and their tips on living strong and healthy, because that's what we want to do. We want this next chapter that could be 20, 30, 40, 50 years. What do you want to do with it? So that's what we are sharing. Lots of tips and tricks and advice for health and to be healthy and to have a strong and wonderful midlife and beyond.
Beautiful. Thank you. Bridgett, any last comments?
I think that summed it up great, Colleen. I think,
well, thank you.
And I wish I'd had that PDF 8 years ago, but I'm glad that we have it now.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. That's a beautiful offer, and we really appreciate it. And again, I am so grateful for the work you're doing. And the women out there everywhere, check it out. Hot Flashes and Cool Topics. You'll learn a ton. You two are amazing. Thank you. Thank you for the work you're doing. I'm just so grateful.
Thanks
And thank you for the
having us.
work you're doing and how you're bringing all these great speakers together, because knowledge is power. So we thank you for all the effort you put into doing this and for inviting us to be on.
It's been my pleasure, my absolute pleasure. Thank you both.
Thank you.